Good morning. Today is Wednesday, July 11th, 2007. My name is Moshe Katz, and I have the unique honor of interviewing Nir Barkin, a former Community Shaliach. Good morning, Nir.
Good morning.
This is different. This is going to be a little more, I hope, a little more different than the average interview. You don't live in Milwaukee. You spent a good chunk of time here, but you live in Israel. Who are you, Nir? And tell us a little bit about your background.
Well, it's interesting that you're talking about the long time that I spent in Milwaukee, because proportionally, while it was only 4 years that I spent here, in the scheme of my entire life, it seems like more than 3/4 of my life that I spent here in terms of the impact the community had on me. But let's start from the beginning.
Please.
My name is Nir Barkin, and I was born in 1966 in Jerusalem. I'm the son of a mixed family, I would call it, in the Israeli terms. My mother is coming from a Sephardi family in Jerusalem. Her father was Hungarian, her mother was Sephardi. They were about 6 generations Jerusalemites, originally from the Balkan, Bulgaria and Yugoslavia. They came to the land of Israel, to Palestine, in the early 1800s. And they settled down in the old city of Jerusalem. My great-great-grandfather had a shoe shop in the Christian quarter of the old city of Jerusalem. And later on, when Moses Montefiore came to the land of Israel and allowed the Jews, or made it possible for the Jews to leave the walls of the old city and to go outside, they settled down near the Machane Yehuda market, which is about 3-4 miles west of where they lived before. They belong to a strong Sephardi community, and what we have till today in our family are mainly the melodies and the smells and the tastes of that heritage. My mother's father is a Holocaust survivor. He came from Hungary, and he married my grandmother, and they settled in Jerusalem. He was a veterinarian, and he was the regional veterinarian of the Jerusalem area. I think you know some of the stories because our mutual friends in Kiryat Anavim knew him as a local doctor, animal doctor. On my other side, on my father's side, I'm the inheritance of a Argentinian-Polish family. My father was born in Warsaw. His original family is from Brest-Litovsk, and in the year 1936, when the Nazi winds came to Poland, the family decided to move to New York. They went on the boat, and they ended up in Buenos Aires, Argentina. They actually settled down in Santa Fe, which is a province in Argentina, and only about 20 years later, in 1954, that the family left Argentina and immigrated to Israel and settled down in a kibbutz in the heart of the country. And I was born about 12 years later. My parents got married in 1961 in Jerusalem, in the Givat Ram campus of the Hebrew University. And my brother was born a year later. Since my father always wanted to be a cinematographer, he wanted to become a film director, my mother and him in the early 60s went to a cinema school in Rome called Cinecittà, where Fellini was the big master there. And my father stayed there for 3 years to become a film director. And when they came back to Israel, the early 60s film was not a big industry then, and my father tried to be one of the founders of this local industry in Israel. My mother was a nurse. She was a midwife, and she served as a nurse for 50 years in various areas, mainly in the Hadassah Hospital in Ein Karem. When I was 3 years old, 2.5 years old, my family and I moved to a kibbutz in the northern part of the country, in the finger of the Galilee, in Emek Achula. The name of the kibbutz was Neot Mordechai. And we settled there after my parents divorced. my mother and the two boys, my older brother and I, began our life there. The years were not simple. The years were the years of the attrition war from the Syrian and Lebanese border, and we were always under the shells and under the alert times of terrorist attacks and terrorist invasions into the country. We felt like we were in the heart of a target where each day there is another kibbutz or a moshav or a school that is being attacked, and it is only a matter of time that our time will come. It was scary. These were frightening years, and the peak of that, I would say, the most difficult times that I faced in those years was the Yom Kippur War that broke on Shabbat, which was obviously Yom Kippur. And about 2 o'clock in the afternoon, we were walking the path of the kibbutz, and we started seeing aircrafts flying above. And as kids, we knew exactly what was the good planes and what were the bad planes. And we immediately recognized that these are Russian aircrafts, Russian airplanes that belong to the Syrian army. And there are many stories about around the Yom Kippur War for me, but this is one of the most shaping experiences that I had in my life. Things have not looked the same after the Yom Kippur War. If you'll ask more about it, I'll give you more answers later. In about 3 years later, 1976, we moved back to Jerusalem. Some years later, I joined the Boyer High School in Jerusalem, which was founded by an American lady called May Boyer. And this was a boarding school and a high school together. It brought children, young adults from the periphery of the country, mainly from the southern part of Israel, to Jerusalem to allow them excellent education. And all they were required, including the Jerusalemite students, all we were asked is to study, and to study hard. This school is well known in the country in making the future leadership of the country in terms of education, in terms of academics, not necessarily politicians. I don't think there are any politician who came out of this high school. In 1984, I joined the Israeli Defense Forces. I began in the Golani Combat Unit, and after a short while that I got wounded there, I moved into the intelligence corps of the country. I served mainly as a mini RPV, drones pilot. You know, drones don't have pilots in them, so you sit in a control room and you control the pilots, the airplanes. After 3 years in service, I did my Miluim, my reserve service, for 15 more years in the research corps of the intelligence of the country, and I stopped serving in the army when I came here in 1999 as a Community Shaliach. Spending 4 years in America, maybe I should start and say it differently. When I left Israel in the year 1999 to come here, I had two options. The first option was to go to North Jersey. The second option was to come to Milwaukee. And when I was thinking together with my wife, Anat, about the future and what I would like to accomplish, I said that I'd like to join an American community. And by community, I mean not something which people come to sleep at night, but people who live around one central area, like the Federation, as well as one JCC. And people spend all their life within the community. They work in the community, they live in the community, they care about the community, and that's why Milwaukee was our first preference rather than New Jersey. When I came here, I thought I had everything. I was a Sabra, I was born in Israel, I was an Israeli. I thought I knew everything I had to know about Judaism, about my roots, about who I belonged to, about my family heritage. And it took me about a year or two into the shlichut, into the time that I served here, that I realized that there is a huge hole in my soul that I have to feel. And it was very clear for me that this is something about who we are as people and what's our mutual responsibility for our people and for our religion. And it took me one more year to understand that everything I was before was with a big thing that was missing. Looking at some of my teachers in the community, you're one of them, Moshe, Philip Nadel, David Cohen, was an outstanding example of how I would like to live my life when I go back to Israel. It was very clear to me that I'm going back, and it was very clear to me that I want to bring shlichut back to the country. I want to make a difference to the people that live in Israel. I want to make a difference for my children, and I want to make a difference for the future generation of the country when it comes to changing the face of Israeli society and changing the face of pluralism, changing the face of equality and human rights in the country. And the best way to do this task was through going to rabbinical school. So, not even knowing this when I came here 4 years before, I got back to Israel in the year 2003 to join the Hebrew Union College in Jerusalem Rabbinical School, which I finished 3 weeks ago. And I'm proud to say that if I wasn't here, I was still, unfortunately, probably wasting my time in the high-tech industry instead of making this huge change and difference. I'll just conclude this long talk with saying that for the last 3 years, I'm serving as an assistant rabbi in the community where we live in Modi'in. Rabbi Nir Barkin founded the community congregation YOZMA in Modi'in when the city was founded 10 years ago. I joined the community 3 years ago, and ever since then I'm serving in three capacities. The first one is in the education capacity, and the second one is the pulpit capacity, and the third one is what we say, Im ein kemach ein Torah. If there's no flour, there's no Torah. And I also help the community to establish itself financially.
It's hard to go from such broad, wonderful issues, but there are a group of 3 children and a pretty spectacular wife that I want to hear more about as well. How did you meet Anat? And tell us a little about her.
The Israel Defense Forces, Moshe, are considered the largest matchmaker of the country. Anat and I served in the same years. Anat joined the Army in 1985. I was in the Army a year already in. And I don't know if it is by coincidence or something that was meant to be, but Anat's last week of service was the time where we met. Anat served as a tour guide of soldiers in the Army. Every combat unit comes to an educational week once a year in various bases in the country, and it's like a retreat. And Anat was trained to be a tour guide of those soldiers, and she was first stationed in the Golan Heights for a year, and then she was stationed in the southern part of the country in a base called Sha'arei Avraham. I was then a commander of the new pilots, the new drivers of the drones course, and I took the soldiers on this retreat week. And we were guided by a woman called Shirley, and Shirley and the other tour guide, who happened to be later on Anat, decided that they can match the 2 groups that happened to be in the same base at the same time. Anat was guiding a group of Army teachers. This is another unit that serve in the periphery and teaches difficult populations, mainly Hebrew and the basics of mathematics and things like that. And the 2 tour guides, Anat and Shirley, decided to bring the 2 groups together, my group and Anat's group. And the moment Anat walked into the room together with her group, I knew this was going to be my wife. I don't know if you want me to get into details.
Absolutely, I do.
It wasn't easy because we had to spend this whole week together with Shirley, the guide whom we had, and I didn't have, with my rank, I didn't have the permission to enter the army base, which we were at, to get more information about Anat, but I belonged to the intelligence. So on the weekend, I sent my commander, my MP, to search, to look for more information about Anat, and he managed to get into the base, the one that Anat served in, and to meet a girl named Sigal. And Sigal, within a short time afterwards, gave him all the information we needed to track down Anat. She said that Anat, at that time, had a boyfriend for 5 years. And if it wasn't for this boyfriend, she has a list of soldiers that come every week to this unit that that are waiting for her. So there is Uri from the Navy, and there is Moshe from somewhere else, but I was far down in the list. She didn't even mention my name when she talked to Sigal that week. And the only light at the end of the tunnel was that she mentioned to my commander on that weekend that Anat's boyfriend is going on a tiyul, on a trip to the United States that Thursday. Well, he gave me this information, and on the way back to my army base that weekend, when the weekend was over, I took all the goodies that my parents packed for me for the week, and I stopped at Anat's base and left it for her. So I have a good excuse to call her later on and say, I left you something, can we meet? While she said, or she confirmed the fact that her boyfriend is going to America and she needs to spend time with him, she said, I wouldn't mind meeting with you the following week. And we met, and what shall I say? The rest is history. So we got together in 1987. We had an outstanding trip together in 1988 to Europe, and we got married in 1989 in Jerusalem, in a place called, the place doesn't exist any longer. It calls Lifta, Mei Naftoach. It was overlooking west, and we got married right after sunset, which was just an amazing scene from there. Anat and I have 3 beautiful children together. We have Amit, that was born in 1992. Amit is an outstanding girl. There's nothing that you can say about a girl like this. Omri was born in 1995, and our baby, who's 7 years old today, was born in America when we were here in Shalichut in Milwaukee. The 3 children are amazing kids, and we're very proud of being the parents of these outstanding children. I want to say a few more words about Anat, if you don't mind. Anat is coming from a different kind of family in Israel. Anat's families belong to what we call in Hebrew Hamishpacha Halochemet, the fighting family. Anat's family is Beitari, and they belong to the Jabotinsky track of the Zionist movement. Also from Eastern Europe, the family fled or came to Israel before the establishment of the state. Anat's grandparents came on the very distinguished boat called Afal Pichen. Despite of all, or in spite of all, the British mandate didn't let the Jews come from Europe, so they had to escape the border. And when Anat's grandparents landed in the shores of northern Tel Aviv, they had to immediately change their identity. So they buried all their documents in the sand, and they got new documents from those Haganah soldiers that were waiting for them. Anat's family joined the Etzel, and they settled down at first in Rosh Bina. They were among the people who paved the road from Rosh Bina to Tiberias. real chalutzim. They worked hard in those days, and later on they settled down in Ramat Gan. Anat's family from on her father's side came from Germany. Anat's grandfather, Anat's father was very involved in making Jews leave Berlin right before the war. He was among the very last Jews to leave Berlin in 1939 and join and come to Israel. I would say he had the ultimate chutzpah to get into the Gestapo headquarters of Berlin and demand or ask for the escape of many Jews. And he was a real hero. And if you read the book Folly about the German-Jewish espionage, spy, you will find a lot of details about this mysterious part in Jewish history in Germany of the late 30s. Anat's grandfather came to Israel in 1939 and immediately joined the intelligence corps of the Haganah, later on to become the Israel Defense Forces. Both Anat's grandfather and father served in the intelligence corps of the country for many years. They had their career done in the IDF.
I want to digress just 1 minute because I think the Hebrew translation sometimes is needed. Your children have rather unique names. Would you just at least define what they are and what they mean?
Yeah. My daughter's name is Amit. Amit means a friend. Her middle name is Imri, and she was born about a year after my grandfather Imre passed away, and we decided to name her, to give her a middle name after him. So she's Amit Imri. She's a friend of who my grandfather was, Imre. Omri is, there are many meanings to the name Omri, but the meaning we like to keep is the fact that Omri was born in Sfirat HaOmer, and Omri is also a little Omer, a little stalk of shibolim, of wheat. And we just like the name very much. Asaf, we have two interpretations of the name Asaf. We love the name, and Anat, my wife, thought it is Hameasef, the last one to collect our children. It took me many years to agree or come to peace with this decision that Asaf is the last one, and we're collecting our stocks together, our shibolim, and putting it all together. So Asaf is a very lovely biblical name, and at the moment he's also the last one. Haven't given up.
You talked about smells and tastes, and there's a rather wide range of smells and tastes because of the wide range of backgrounds you have. Share some of them.
In every memorial event that we hold for my grandparents, my grandfather who was Hungarian and my grandmother who was a Jerusalemite Sephardi, we try to make as many of the tastes, the dishes that used to be served in the house. So I'll just pick several of them so we can enjoy the breakfast together. Coming from a Sephardi family, my grandmother was a very, very good cook, and she used to make delicious things, but her variety of recipes was limited. I mean, we could come there on a certain day within the range of 2 weeks and get the same thing. Once in every 2 weeks, the recipes began to repeat themselves, which was wonderful. It felt stability, it felt home. We knew from the going up the stairway to their house, what what day is it, because of what she made. But the outstanding dishes were the homemade burekas that she used to make, obviously out of a special family recipe, which she always kept. And this is another good story of hers. When we wanted to get her recipes, she would say, "Oh, this is very easy. Take some flour, margarine, water, and mix it together." We said, "Savta, Grandma, this wouldn't work this way." And she said, "Of course it would. Just mix it well." It never comes out the way it was. And she never left us the real recipes. So we're still doing attempts, experiments to find the real taste. So burekas was one of her outstanding recipes. She used to do Wiener strudel. And this is a whole different track. If we have time, we'll go into that connection that my grandmother had with the German-Austrian heritage. But we'll talk about it later if we have time. She used to make begelach. Begelach are those round, salted dough cookies that have this hole inside. And she used to make them for special events. The one thing that my grandmother made for bris or bar mitzvah, bat mitzvah, and weddings was her unique marzipan. It was, again, a family recipe that she learned from her mother, and she used to put the marzipans in a box. It always had to be metal box, and only very close family relatives were allowed to taste this. So she would go among the crowd and open the box only for those whom she thought are entitled to get it. Only the royal family was to get this marzipan from my grandmother. When my grandfather joined the family, she had to learn some of the Hungarian style dishes, and about 5 years ago, when I had my farewell dinner with Mel and Eva Zeretz, I got the privilege to taste once again some of my grandmother's Hungarian recipes, which was the meeting or the encounter between East and West. She used to make an outstanding goulash, and there was paprika shkrumpli and chicken shkrumpli and everything that was. She had a very, very wonderful and unique talent in bringing those East and West recipes into her kitchen. And for us, it was very, very homey. Felt very, very good to come to her house and eat again and again her dishes. It is interesting that her girls, my mother and my aunts and my uncle, do not follow her way of cooking. They use cookbooks, which my grandmother never had. And when we go quite often to my mother's to have Friday night dinners or Shabbat meals, and she would ask us, "What would you like?" And I would always go back to the old, tasty, good recipes. Never ask something new. I mean, it's always the good old chicken in the oven with potatoes that I would want to go back to.
Nir, you have a wonderfully diverse background, and there's no question it's made you who you are. But you said earlier that the 4 years you spent in Milwaukee also completed who you are, or helped complete who you are. Mix this all up and make sense of it for us.
When I was 14 years old, I joined the Young Ambassadors Delegation of the Foreign Ministry and the Jerusalem Municipality to the United States. It was a mixed delegation of Arabs and Jews from both sides of Jerusalem, the eastern part and the western part. And we visited 4 communities. We visited Chicago, Illinois, Portland, Maine, Boston, and New York. This trip had an enormous impact on my life. In Portland, Maine, we met a family of shlichim. Their name was Eti and Yisrael Saruk. Eti and Suki were considered one of the best shlichim that the Jewish agency could send in the early 80s to the United States. I kept it in the back of my mind that one day I would like to take my family and go to America and be a shaliach. But life is life, and you don't plan life, or even if you plan life, God's upstairs laughing at you. But when I finished my bachelor's degree and Anat finished her travel agency expertise, I worked for about 8 years in the high-tech business. I worked for companies, international companies like Intel Corporation, Manpower, and MS Communications. And all those years spending in the high-tech business did not fulfill something which I didn't know what is missing. I knew it's not what I want to do in life, but I didn't know what is missing. And I think it was January 1999 that I came to my boss at MS Communications and said to him that I'm leaving. And he was sure that I was headhunted by a new company or another company. These were the best years of the internet and the best years of high-tech industry in Israel in general. And when he asked me what am I going to do, I said, actually, I do not know what I'm going to do, but I know that I'm not in the right place for me. And he said, and well, how are you going to make a living? I said, I'll take some time off, and then probably in September 1999, I will become a teacher. That's how I see myself in Israel today. I thought of being a history teacher or a teacher for social studies or something in these areas. And from February 1999 until about late May that year, I was looking for something more meaningful in my life. And among other things that I was inspecting or checking for myself and for the family was this ad in the newspaper that was saying we're looking for educational emissaries to go to different countries and bring the prophecy of Israelity, of the Israel people. And I applied to one of the ads, and I think that it took us about 6 months until we got to Milwaukee. This was a life-changing event for me, not only because I felt that finally I'm fulfilling my dream, or I am fulfilling what I want to do in life in terms of contributing to the Jewish people, in terms of something that has a long-lasting impact on other people's life. But also I felt that my desire to find something more meaningful than just the technological industry was proved to be right. And as I said to you before, it took some years, some good 2 years here, to realize that everything I thought I had was, or came to reality that there is a huge hole there. And the fact that I can fill this hole with our bridging our two communities in Israel and outside the country, on one hand, and on the other hand, bring back into our equation the fact that Jewish life are so important to the country, to Israel. And there is more than one way to be Jewish. This whole spectrum of colors was very new to me. And I had to go out of the country for that long to realize that I want to bring back something which does not exist there, or hardly exists there, and to join this group of pioneers in Israel that are working day and night to change the face of Israeli society in all aspects. When it comes to human rights, when it comes to pluralism, when it comes to egalitarian. So I think what Milwaukee allowed me to do is to express who I really was, but I didn't know that I was that.
Give us some of the highlights of those 4 years. Give me 2, 3 highlights, 10, 20 highlights.
Yeah. I think there was one thing that Anat and I knew when we came here. We knew that we know nothing, and we knew that we want to bring love. And between being able to lower our expectations to a very, very low level in terms of what we can contribute to the community, and the fact that we were very open to get and absorb everything that the community could contribute to us, the meeting point was very meaningful. Kathy Bernstein hired me to do this job, and she said, take 6 months to learn. And I indeed did that. I took time to learn the community, and in those 6 months I opened our house for people as much as we could. We wanted to learn as much as we can from the people around us about how is American Jewish life all about. And the first Sukkot, Anat and I decided to have an open house. And we opened the house and we built a sukkah, and many people came. It was shocking. It was interesting to see that people are indeed connected to Israel, and people are willing to come and get to know you. And this gave us a very strong positive boost to continue in this way. Another very meaningful for me point was when I decided to go and hear what the Israel Committee of the Milwaukee Jewish Day School is doing. And it was not, I can't remember if it was in September, October of 1999, but it was in the very early months of our stay here that I heard that there is a committee, Israel Committee of the Day School, and I came to the meeting. And as I was walking out the meeting, I met you, and I think that this meeting changed my life, Moshe. I think it changed both of our lives, not only to the better, but also to the deeper. And it allowed me to understand the community from a perspective that an outsider can never understand unless he has someone like you inside, you and Deborah. So talking about life-changing encounters, this is definitely something that was more meaningful than anything else that I can think of throughout the Shlichut. And we made many friends and many friendships. And we didn't try to teach anybody anything. We tried to be who we are, because our very basic understanding was that you cannot change people's life unless you become their friend. And you cannot preach to people, and you cannot convince people to change where they want to live and what they want to do in life. What you can do is have them have the image of Israel throughout who you are. And if we succeeded only in that, only by changing people's vision about Israel and who are the Israelis and what are the Israelis of the late 90s, beginning of the 2000s, are all, this is enough for us. Just by coincidence, my brother, Yoel, my older brother, who was at my house last week and heard that yet another delegation is coming through the house. I'm talking about almost 4+ years after we returned to Israel. We had 3 families coming to our house last week. He said, didn't you complete your service already? And the fact that 4 years later, people are still stopping by and giving us the honor of hosting them, this is something very meaningful. This is something that proves that our friendship and our love to the Milwaukeean people lasted longer than just our period here, which we're happy about.
What impact do you think the experience had on your children? Not just for the time they're here, but broader as well.
Taking children from one environment to another, as I experienced in my childhood, is a difficult thing to do. I will never forget the tears in the eyes of my daughter as we were driving from Modi'in to the airport to come to Milwaukee. She was 7 years old, going up to second grade, and the tears expressed her sadness of leaving the huge family and friends behind. I must tell you, Moshe, that the tears that she had when we left Milwaukee were a lot stronger. So if I manage to give my children the experience of living in two very important communities and to understand that she has something beyond just living in the Jewish state, both Anat and I did what we had to do as parents.
There's an expression that there's only 6 degrees of separation from one person to another. You've already given us a hint of those degrees being significantly less. You are close friends today with a particular family that also had an impact in Milwaukee a few years earlier. Comment on, I'll use the Israeli families as a signpost, but comment on your background that way, that there's you're following in the footsteps of those who came before you, and what would you say to other shluchim who come from this point forward?
About 2 years after we got here, I had a very talented young student who worked in the Israel Center here. Her name was Mara Simon Meyer. And when I was thinking about what I would like Mara to do in the Israel Center in helping us as a volunteer, I said, let's try and track down all the previous shlichim before me and make a nice book that summarizes it was 40 years of shlichut at that time. I never for 1 second thought that my impact is stronger or different than those who came before me. I always knew that I'm a chain in the whole, a link in the chain of Israel emissaries to the community. It took us about 6 months to research the archives and find the names in the right order and find the highlights of each one of them, men and women who came before us to Milwaukee. You must know that Milwaukee is very special. When the first Shaliach came to Milwaukee in 1968, there were not many shlichim in American Jewish communities, federations like yours, like Milwaukee. And Milwaukee kept Shlichut, the program, for all those years, till today. And when I came to Rick Meyer, the executive director of the Federation, and said to him, please include me in every staff meeting that you have. I want to be part of the team. Because the fact that we change every 2 to 4 years and we go back doesn't mean that we're less professionals or have less connection to what's going on here. It's only the person that changes, but the actual position or the essence of having an Israeli emissary in the staff is very important. So with this understanding in my mind and our work to find or track down all those previous shlichim and shlichot before me, we put together an, I think, outstanding book. And with a first mission to go to Israel after we completed this task, we brought together all the previous families those who are still exist. And it was a very unique reunion of the Shlichut office. These were different figures with different priorities along the way, different times. But it seemed like one holding the other one's hand in this long chain of continuity and stability of Jewish Zionist presence from Israel in the Milwaukee Jewish community.
What would you offer, if you could have a sentence or two, what would you offer to the incoming shlichim? What would you say about Milwaukee? What would you highlight?
For me, Milwaukee today is home. It's not even a second home. I have two homes. I have home in Modi'in in Jerusalem, and I have home in America, and Milwaukee is home for me. And I think what made Milwaukee home for me are my friends and the families that we adopted here. Most of all is the fact that we came here open-minded. We knew that we know nothing better than the people who live here, and we were willing to learn from each other. And if I have to say one thing, is that whoever comes to Milwaukee needs to understand that they're coming to the center and the heart of Jewish life in North America, and they have to be open and very modest about who they are in order to absorb, give and take as much as they can together with the community.
Times have changed and maybe they haven't. You said earlier that when you were living up north, you were fearful on a daily basis for your own lives and life. We can't have a conversation without at least touching on what your feelings are today in Israel. Spend a few minutes, please, on that.
My situation as a little child in the kibbutz in the north, from 1969 until 1976, was a difficult situation. I didn't have a father. My mother was busy as a community nurse. My brother was in his children's home, and I was in my children's home. At that time, children grew up with their peers, not in their home families, in their own families. And the outside attacks were just an add-on on this agony, on this despair, on this difficult times that I had as an individual, as a person. And it felt very peripheral, living in the north. We knew that there is other life in Israel, in the center of Israel, which we were not exposed to. On Yom Kippur, I said before, on Yom Kippur we were very close to the point where all the women and children had to evacuate the kibbutz because the Syrians reached the area of Gonen, which is about, I would say, 3 to 5 miles away from where we were. So you can imagine caravans of Syrian tanks flowing down the Golan Heights towards the valley, and those children in bomb shelters are being prepared for evacuation. How would you even think that Jews in Israel have to evacuate their homes in the year 1973? This is unheard of. We ended up staying in the kibbutz. The troops led by Dan Lenner, who was a member of happened to be a member of our kibbutz, managed to stop the tanks, the Syrian tanks, from coming down to the valley, and we managed to stay for about 4 months in bomb shelters. And I said, I was telling this story before, but I think it's important for the record.
5 minutes.
We were very lonely at those years, at those months. And one very strong memory that I have as a child, 7-year-old child from those years, was that I can't tell you if it was a day, 2 days, or a week after the war broke out, that there was a woman named Helen. I think she was American. She was certainly Jewish, who came to the different bomb shelters where the children stayed in. And she was having a suitcase filled with toys she brought with her. She brought with her to the children staying in bomb shelters in the northern part of the country. Helen changed my perspective on global Jewish life. Helen told me, by giving me the teddy bear she gave me, that she cares about me, and that Jews here in America and in Israel are one people. And she didn't have to say anything. She just came and she visited. You're talking about the situation today when the winds of war from the northern border as well as from the southern border are blowing again. And I must tell you that it does feel like history repeats itself. While in the year 1973, only the northern part of the country and the very south part of the country was attacked by the Syrians and the Egyptians, today the entire country is being exposed or being under the threat of missiles and rockets. Nowhere is safe anymore. Neither the city where we live in, Modi'in, which is about 20 miles from Ramallah, nor Beersheba or Tel Aviv, or any other city in Israel. It feels like a real threat. Having said that, we have to conclude our interview, and I don't want to finish in this downside. Having said that, I think the path that both Anat and I chose to ourselves after coming from Milwaukee has a huge impact on the Israeli society. And while we have very little to do or to or to say about what can be done or will be done when it comes to our outside enemies, we have a lot to do within the country. We have much to contribute to make our society healthier, stronger, and try to match some of the learnings that I did here in Milwaukee and bring it back to Israel and have our society as strong, as beautiful, and as yours here.
Thank you, Nir. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.